Okay, everybody, so we're going to talk about this project right here, and I'm going to walk you through this project from beginning to end. So you have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and you have a 11 by 17 piece of paper, and this is going to move over to this right here. And I want this to be in 1/2 inch scale, and you're just going to copy everything that you see as cleanly and completely as possible. I want you to be doing this as if you are being as exact as you possibly can. So I have some tips and tricks for you. You can take or leave a lot of these. Ultimately, if you're able to copy this as neat and easy as possible, that's all you really have to do. You don't have to do it in any of the ways I talk about, but there are multiple ways to do it in the fashion that is accurate. So that'll be a little bit more clear as I move through this project. So first of all, you need a piece of paper. And you want this piece of paper to be square. I'm going to also dust off any of the model making things that have been on my desk beforehand. And now I'm going to sit down this piece of paper. Now what I want to do is tape it down. If you have masking tape or painter's tape, it's even better. But what you want to do is go ahead and take your tape and put it on your jeans, put it on your t-shirt, put it on something, and stick it a few times and pull it off. This is actually going to reduce the amount of stick that's on the end of your tape. And you're doing this on purpose so that when you stick it to your page, it doesn't rip off. So what I'm going to do is very, very carefully line this up to exactly the edge of the grid that is on my piece of paper, or that's on my table. So I'm doing this very carefully and on purpose so everything is exactly aligned. The more that you are very careful and very intentional in the times that you need to be means it is going to speed up my process later. So I'm going to tape this down. You could willy-nilly just tape this to your table if you don't have a grid below it, or you're not going to use this ruler system that I'm about to show you. And all of that is perfectly fine. The only difference this is going to do, if, for example, you don't tape it down, is you're just going to be finding square on your paper every time you do it. And I'm going to refocus this. So you're going to be finding square on your paper every time you go back to your paper, which is fine, but it can be a bit tedious. So what I'm going to do is tape these things in place so that I don't have to find square multiple times. And in case it isn't obvious, these rulers just kind of hang out on my drafting table and they remain here for when I need to sketch for a long period of time. This one has sagged a little, so I need to refresh how this one is taped down because I want it to be as square as possible. Once I tape it once, I really won't need to worry about taping it again. Now I have missed taping this corner over here, but because I have several points all the way around this piece of paper, that shouldn't be a big deal. If it is a big deal, I'll pull my ruler up and make that accommodation later. Now, why did I tape this down? Why did I tape it down on a grid? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this so that I can get something as straight and even as possible. So these rulers, if I decide to tape 2 spare pieces of wood that are straight, or rulers or whatever I want, now when I use a triangle, I can set this triangle here, and every time I set this triangle here, it will be straight. Every time I set a triangle here, it will be straight. No matter what I do, I have an easy and fast access to get a straight line. And that's super important when you're trying to move quickly. Is it necessary? No. Is it useful? Sure is. So I like to use these 2 pieces securely taped to my table. I also like to use a grid. Now, you may be able to barely see it, but I can very clearly see the darkest lines of this grid through my piece of paper. And that's really great to help me establish guidelines. So I know that I'm going to be making a straight line anywhere on here if I'm stuck on these rulers on the bottom or the side. And I also know I'm drawing a straight line if I'm drawing a line right on that grid. If you don't have these rulers, but you do have a nice long corkback ruler or ruler of another kind, the other thing you can do is use it all the way across this page. So this last dot right here and this last line all the way down here line up. And if I make sure to use this ruler all the way through the paper, I know any line that I draw in the middle is going to be perfectly straight. So ultimately, these are 3 different ways to use your environment to make sure that your paper, everything drawn on your paper is square or straight. So when you're doing it this way or doing it any other way, the key here is that you have 2 points active to draw a straight line. So if you're drawing a straight line here, you want to be holding this point outside the page up here and outside the page down here, and then you can draw a straight line and be assured that that line is a straight line. Now I promise you there is a line on this piece of paper. It's a very light pencil line, probably what I would call a guideline line weight line. So meaning that it's very, 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 very light. I'm going to erase it because I don't need a line right there. But if so that uses 2 points. If I'm doing this, I'm using 1 point and a square to create my second point. So then I know that that line is going to be perfectly straight. If I'm using the grid underneath the piece of paper, then I'm using a point over here and a point over here that I'm seeing through my page to know that I'm perfectly straight. So when you're drawing any line on the inside of this, you need either 2 points that you know are equally spaced in order to connect. Well, that's fun. I did not know that would do that while it's over here. So evidently I can do, I bet that this will. Oh, come on. No lasers for us. But we can do thumbs up and rain, evidently. Cool. We'll see if I cut that out. Anyway, anytime you're drawing 2 things, you need 2 points that you can connect in order to make a straight line. In order to make sure whatever you're drawing is a straight line and perpendicular, right? So now that we have this kind of set up, and again, I'm only setting it up this way so that my drawing can be faster. I'm going to go ahead and approach this actual project. So what do I need? I need a triangle. If you don't have a triangle, you can fold a triangle out of a piece of paper. Just take any piece of paper and fold that piece very carefully into a nice straight triangle and fold your excess over to create a triangle. And now you have a right angle. You can also use a notebook, the right angle of a piece of paper, all sorts of things like that if you need to, in order to make some of your right angles more, equally. That being said, triangles are the easiest way to do that, and we do have some in the department that you can borrow. The other thing you might need, if you have one, is a circle template. If you don't have one, you just need something that has a circular shape to it, and we'll use that later. An eraser and a pencil is your best friend, and you can use ye olde regular pencil or sketching pencil, but a mechanical pencil is actually great for this purpose. Mechanical pencils are kind of specially designed for drafting and making drafting easier. An eraser is also super helpful in case, like me, your mechanical pencil does not really have an eraser on the backside of it. Also, if you have a compass, you can use a compass to draw your circles. There are compasses in the design studio that you can use for this purpose as well. So just keep that in mind as you're doing this project. So, where am I going to start? I'm going to start with erasing this errant little pencil mark. So I'm going to start with the border. The border is one of the biggest spaces, and I'm going to go ahead and start by, or the thickest lines rather. And I'm going to start with my sketching pencil because the sketching pencil allows me to have a better, thicker line. One second. I'm going to get some more tape and tape this up. Okay, that's better. So I've gotten a sturdier piece of tape all the way across the bottom, so this is a little bit more even. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to end up smacking this against it relatively frequently, and I want it to be sturdy. I also forgot to mention that I have a scale ruler in this situation because scale is going to be pretty important for this project. So I'm going to start with my border. And for my border, I'm just going to make it about 1/2 inch from the edge of the piece of paper all the way around. And this is where I'm actually looking through this see-through ruler right to this dot right here, because that is halfway through the square in the bottom, and then drawing my line. I probably shouldn't have drawn it all the way to the bottom, but I'll erase that in a second. So once I've drawn that line, I can carefully line this up to extend it. But if I'm able to have a ruler that is long enough, that's a better option. So if I want to erase this line down here, which I do, I want to make sure that I'm going to do this on the 1/2 inch mark. So I have a couple of options. Like I said, you can hold this ruler to the edge of a line at any time and just very carefully and meticulously make sure that you are fully aligned on it. So if I want to go a 1/2 inch in real scale from the edge, I'll use my ruler, mark that 1/2 inch, and then bring back in my triangle and very carefully make sure that it's lined up. The other thing that I can do is using this triangle here, I can use this triangle here against it, and as long as I make sure all of these things are flush, I know that the line that I'm about to draw right here is going to be nice and straight. So once I've drawn that line, I'm going to extend this all the way across in a second. I want to delete, I want to erase this line right here. But if I go at it with my eraser, I might end up erasing something that I do want to keep. So I'm going to go ahead and erase quite a bit. And you can see that there's a little bit of an indentation in the paper there. It doesn't fully and completely erase. So when you're doing your project, anytime you're on your interior things and it's not a really heavy line on the border, you want to go with a light line first and then adjust to the amount of pressure you need to make the line look the way you want it to look. Now, I'm also going to use this as an eraser shield. So by that, it means I'm going to cover everything I don't want to erase and then push up to it with my eraser to get a nice clean eraser line. You can also do that with a piece of paper or anything else you would like. I mentioned earlier, if you have a nice long ruler, that it can be very helpful in these situations. So I'm going to take these triangles, move them to the side, and give myself a nice long ruler across this page. I need to give myself a second mark for how far away from this edge I want to be. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself a mark here. This way I can take my triangle and give myself a very light line to show the intersection of where that border is going to be. And then draw that with a nice straight ruler. Being very careful to line that up correctly. And this is a border, and so the border is going to be pretty thick. So I'm going to come up just a little bit, and I'm going to draw a second line directly next to that line, and that will make my border even thicker. You can see that this line is thicker than this line over here. I'm going to come over here and mark that 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch over, and I'm going to connect these items. Just like I did before, I'm going to come over here and do a really light line so that I know how far that needs to be connected. And then use my long ruler to make that line look perfect. I know that often we are tempted to sharpen our pencils a lot, and sharpening your pencil will help you get a very thin line, especially if you're doing a regular pencil. But when you want a thicker line, you actually want your pencil to not be super sharp, because if your pencil is a little bit used, a little bit dull, you get a nice thick line with it. Last but not least, we've got a line up here, and I'm going to line that up on both lines and go from side to side. The cork back ruler makes it very helpful because it doesn't like to move as much as some of your other rulers. Your triangles will like to move. Things will like to move around on you a lot. But the cork back ruler actually, has the cork on the back, so it doesn't tend to move on you. So next we're gonna draw these pieces over here. And what we wanna do is line all these things up. So we're gonna give ourselves a guideline. So I'm gonna take this triangle and I'm gonna choose an arbitrary distance, meaning random. And I'm just gonna give myself a tiny little guideline on this side. You can kind of barely see that in the video feed, but you can see it. So that's good. And go all the way to the top. And from that line, I'm gonna go ahead and make this 4 inches away. Or 4 feet, sorry, 4 feet in scale, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, because it says 4 feet right here. So that is 2 real inches. That's something that I'm very used to doing that on a regular ruler rather than your scale ruler, but should you not be used to doing that, you want to find the 1/2 inch scale side of your scale ruler and then put 4 feet on the edge and then mark 0. So I've got a tiny little mark there that I can put my triangle up against and do that same guideline line that I had set out before. This guideline will help me to draw where I would like to draw and make sure all of my lines are nice and equally spaced. So I'm going to start with I'm going to have a dimension line at the top. We're copying everything on this piece of paper, including those dimension lines, except for please put your name where it says your name instead of drafting name McNamerson, should your assignment still say that. So I'm going to start with a dimension line, which is one of the lightest lines. And I'm actually going to use this ruler on the side to help evenly space my things. So I'm going to do a line at number 2. I'm going to go from this edge to this edge, nice and light, just like my dimension lines. And then this title over here is just chillin'. So I'm going to give myself that same super light line in order to see it. So now I'm going to pick a measurement and I'm going to give myself another guideline, and that will be where I do borderline. So I'm just moving an even amount down this ruler on the left-hand side in order to give myself the guidelines that I need. And I'm not worried about drawing the line thickness here right now. But I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 guidelines. Let's not start down here yet. Let's just do 10. All right. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 evenly spaced lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes. Okay, so you can also use a mechanical pencil, which makes these lighter lines much more useful, and I really like them for the words and writing because it just feels a lot more consistent. So I'm going to have that closer by. My thicker line, so this border line, is the same line that we just did. So I'm going to do a nice thick line, and I'm going to use these this ruler pushed right up against my other ruler again. But now that I have a guideline, I could just come off and use that guideline as a straight edge. So I could just line it up very carefully and then make a clean line without moving it. I find though that pushing it up against something keeps it from moving quite as much, and that can be more useful in trying to make a nice even line. Now in your example, this line is thicker than this line is thicker than this line, and then this one is kind of a regular line. So what I tend to do is figure out what it is, like how my pencil is working. So that's a regular line, and then I make this one a little bit thicker, make this one a lot thicker, and then go back to my thickest line and make sure it's even thicker than that. on a computer, you're going to specify when you're drafting on a computer the exact millimeter that these lines are taking up. So it's not going to be hard for you to make them the right size. So on our dimension line up here, I'm going to switch to the mechanical pencil because this is very light. We already have kind of a guideline happening here, so I'm just going to make that a little bit more firm. And I'm going to make this diagonal line nice and neatly. And then right up here, 4 foot 0 inches. And now that is a dimension line. I'm going to use this as a guideline, make a line underneath it, and then write the word line weight guide. In drafting, we write in all capital letters to make things a little bit more readable, but it takes a little getting used to. All right, so now we also have a border line here, so I'm going to write border line parenthesis 1.00 millimeters and parenthesis. Now, this is really helping me to stay straight, these guidelines that I have here. And when the guidelines are really nice and light, you don't have to erase them. So I'm writing right on top of them, centering my word on this line, rather than worrying about sitting my word on top of this line. The second one is 70 millimeters. Visible outline. You do want your handwriting to be very neat. So if your natural handwriting is not very neat, you can watch the extra videos about handwriting, or you can work in all caps nice and slow to try and make sure to copy that writing as cleanly as possible. Detail lines, 25 millimeters. Okay, so now we have those top 4 lines done. Doing good, doing good, doing good, doing good, doing good, doing good. Okay, now we're going to do this hidden line, which is a dashed line. So we have a couple options here on how to do this, but I find that using any sort of straight edge that has a ruler is the easiest. And what I'm going to do is just go draw 2, skip 2, draw, well, I skipped 1. And I'm going to need to lighten my dimension line because you really can't see, or my guideline, because I really can't see where I've drawn and where I haven't drawn. But I'm going to skip 1, draw 2 of whatever this measurement is. It doesn't technically matter which measurement it is, just as long as I'm doing it in a dashed line. Then I'm going to label that dashed line. Oh, I should have labeled that hidden. All right. So I'm going to erase that. I am going to redraw this guideline, but I don't actually have to use the other thing. I just need to use 2 points to make sure that it's the same. Hidden millimeters. Okay. Next is a dimension line. So it should be just about as thick as it actually is. And the pencil, the mechanical pencil, is really good for that because it can make it feel very smooth. Now, I did just do my dashes this way instead of this way. That doesn't matter. You can do it either direction. Dimensions. And a plaster line is a very thick dash. So we're going to do the same thing. And this time I'm going to do 3, skip 2, 3, skip 2, 3, skip 2, 3, skip 2, and that's the end of my line. I'm going to come back in and erase those extras. Another way that you could do this is to draw the whole line and then come in with your eraser and just erase in between. So that would be a little something like this, where you draw that whole line and then you come in with a nice clean eraser and you erase at even intervals. And you can also use a piece of paper to make those cleaner intervals. I really like drawing it skipping because the eraser is just not all that reliable. Sometimes it leaves a lot of leftover stuff and it's hard to see. So you also have a P and an L on this line because this line represents the plaster line. The plaster line is the line that goes from the back of the proscenium across the stage and helps us to orient ourselves in the space. Often when we move from theater to theater, the ground plan gets bigger or smaller. So the plaster line and the center line, which is the next line that we're going to draw, is something that gives us a lot of locational information, and we base all of the locational information on when we load in the set on where this plaster line and center line is. So this, just like the plaster line, there's a center line symbol that goes on top of this line. I'm just going to erase those empty parts to make them a little bit more visible. But the center line is something that is marked with a long and then short, long and then short. These are universal symbols for center line and plaster line so that people know they are not just any hidden line, they are not just any hidden feature, and they're a little bit thicker than your dimension lines because they're important references. The last one is a cutting plane, and that is a dimension line, but we put a little arrow on the end. This is supposed to be a kind of dimension level line, so it's nice and light. And on it, you're supposed to have a little circle with a letter inside. That letter is telling you, this is that kind of hyperlink like letter. So this letter is telling you that you're looking to have a section view or cut somewhere else. So this indicates if you have a section view of something that is not on the center line, then it's on some line that exists in some way. What line is that? This will indicate what line that is. So if I want to tell you that I'm cutting this piece in the center, it's a section is assumed to be in the center. But what if you have an object that I don't want to cut in the center? I want to cut where it's the most interesting. I will indicate that in the drafting with that line and two arrows, and the arrows point in the direction that you will see the cut happen. So if I break this item and look at it in this direction, that's how the cutting plane will work. And so now we've got our first section done. So that first section is all good. We finished that out. Now you can move down to this platform section, or you can move over to this theater and theater scenery section. And I'm actually going to move down to the platforms because I've already got some guidelines set up for that. I'm going to turn my triangle this way, and I'm going to make sure that this bottom line is off the bottom of the page. So that's going to be 8 feet in scale and then 4 feet in scale, and then we're going to come up another 4 feet. I made that mark specifically on this line over here, and we already know that 4 feet in this scale is 2 real inches, but if we didn't, I could always count 1, 2, 3, 4. I could also use my scale ruler, but this allows me to be a little bit quicker. And then I'm going to do 10 inches. Now, I may be good at guessing on this, but I can't guess 10 inches. That's a lot, but it is the whole amount is 2'6". That I can measure quite easily because that's 1, 2, and then 1/4 of an inch, which is 6. So I'm going to put that guideline down, and then I'm going to put another guideline down for this dimension line. And I'm going to also put a guideline down so I can write the word stairs easily. So I'm going to put that guideline for the stairs down. I'm going to make it thicker so that there's an underline to the title. And then I'm going to write the word stairs because it's there. So I'm going to write it. And then this dimension line is 4 feet. So once again, I'm going to label it 4 foot 0 inches. I'm going to make my marks. And then I'm going to use this to make those 2 lines up against the staircase and platform situation. Now I know that this line is going to be very thick, this line is going to be very thick and go all the way down. So I'm going to thicken up those guidelines that I just made. And I made a mistake. I'll point it out in a second. Excuse me. Excuse me again. So I'm going to make this a thicker line. I'm going to come over here, and there's not a thicker line all the way down, but there is a thicker line from this corner to here. And then I need to make these other lines out here. Now, I don't know if you've caught the mistake I made yet, but I drew this first line, and I said I was leaving room for the dimensions, and then I didn't. So I'm going to come back in, and I'm going to make this dimension line below the platform itself. So this right here is the dimension line for this first part, and that needs to be 8 inches, or 8 feet in scale. And so I'm going to use the scale ruler this time because I don't have this bottom ruler is not lined up perfectly to those numbers. So now I'm going to come in and go, okay, that's 0, 6, 8. So I need to make a mark at 8 feet. And then I need to make a mark 4 more feet away. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 12. There's going to be another dimension line outside that, but that's fine. While I have my scale ruler here, I'm going to go ahead and mark the 10 inches here. So that right there is 10 inches in scale. And we'll do it again. And so that's 3 even spaces on those 10 inches. So I'm going to switch back to my trusty triangle and do the top line of the stairs, do the next line of the stairs all the way across, do the next line of the stairs all the way across. And now I overshot here and I want to neaten that up a little bit. So if I want to neaten that up a little bit, I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'm going to mask off the line that I don't want to erase and then go to town on that little tiny bit. And now I can get that perfect line perfectly placed. Okay, back to making my lines perfect. Before I do that, if I draw this line, I don't know how far I'm going. I'm going to overshoot and then I'm going to have to erase again. So I'm going to go ahead and come up here and instead I'm going to draw this line nice and firm for the bottom of the little 4-foot ramp. I'm going to flip my triangle over so I can get closer to the corner. And then I'm going to draw this line nice and firm. And now I'm going to draw the dimension line while I'm over here. Do, 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 do. And so this is 8 foot 0 inches, 4 foot 0 inches, 4 foot 0 inches. And then there's a dimension, there's a note here that says this is a rake. So I'm going to write rake. And I'm using the guideline that already exists over there just for interest. Now there's this little squiggly arrow, and that squiggly arrow is a note. That squiggly arrow is a note that says, hey, this thing is a rake. So when you do that squiggle, one of the things is that it's a completely organic thing. It's one of the things you can do without a ruler, because the idea is that because it is so fluid, it looks different than everything else on this piece of paper and is therefore completely unique. So you can just do it real quick and put an arrow on one end and attach the arrow to your line on the other end, or put the word rake right on the end there. But it doesn't actually matter. There's another one right here that says platform. So I'm just going to do it again and then write platform. But it doesn't actually matter if this is a perfect call out. I'm going to go back to making these lines really nice and neat. Now that I have this end point here, I can draw this line all the way across and it's going to be nice and neat and even. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Love the sound of the pencil across a piece of paper. So I mentioned to you before that there are a couple circles you're going to have to draw. And so again, you can use a template circle template if you have one. If you don't, you can just use a small circular item. And we want to aim for the middle here, but they are dimensional pieces, like they're instructional pieces. So they don't have to be perfectly in the center. We have a guideline for this one, so I'm going to go ahead and put it perfectly in the center. And then on this one over here, I need one on this side and one on this side. These are technically dimension level things. So I'm just going to use this as a straight edge to make my arrows here. And then inside each of these boxes, I'm going to write the height that it is from the deck. So this is plus 8 inches. This is plus 16 inches. This is plus 32 inches. This is plus 40 inches. And then I'm going to create a dimension line that goes from corner to corner. Can you do this with a ruler or a triangle? Absolutely. The point is that this is a straight line, not a measured line, and that it is a dimension level thickness. So I can make it with anything that I want. That's why I'm making it with a circle template, because the circle template's just in my hand. Oh, I wrote 30Z just because I wasn't quite paying attention. So plus 32 inches to plus 8 inches means that this is a ramp that's going to be 32 inches tall, and then it's going to go down to 8 inches. Next, we have a couple more dimensions that need to happen over here. I'm going to go back to my trusty triangle, and I'm going to come down with the 2 foot 6 inch measurement here. And I know that that's 2 foot 6 because I had measured it earlier, and I know that 10 is about right here. And then I'm going to make sure it comes out and it's square, and mark that as 10 inches. And now this guy over here is done. I've got all the pieces of that complete. Okay. So one of the reasons I did that is because these kind of need to fit where they go. And technically all the other things are a little bit floating in space. And so there's not a huge amount that you have to put those items exactly where they go. So I'm going to go ahead and work on my title block down over here. And I'm going to flip this up like this. I'm going to make my title block in from the edge. And a title block does not have a specific size that it has to be. You could measure your title block, but it's a little bit more of a visual thing. You're just trying to make your title block the right size. This time, I'm actually looking at the graph that's underneath my piece of paper to make them an equal height and an equal space from one another. And then you don't have to worry about making these kind of compartments that have each of the pieces of text in it the exact right size. You're just going to need to draw in them. So I'm going to need a plate box here, and then I'm going to need at least one more row here for update, drafting, and scale, and then I'm going to need 3 lines for additional information. Now, this is all lovely, but I'm going to want to add thickness to the border, and that just helps this stand out against all the rest of the line work that is happening on this page. And with a mechanical pencil, I have to do a couple swipes just to get this to a medium size width. If I picked up my normal sketching pencil to do this, it would lay down a lot more lead and a lot thicker of a line a lot faster. Now I'm just going to fill it out. So drafting, project, number 1. Does it have to be in all caps? Yes, it does. In the McTheater Theater. I'm going to divide this in half. And we have scale. 1/2 inch equals 1 foot. Update. And go ahead and put today's date in there whenever you complete this. Today happens to be 2/18/24. And then you're going to go drafting, basics because that's what this plate is. Then you're going to give what would essentially be your director's name, which is me, Jennifer Ivy. Ivy, just putting that out there. And then you're going to have like your draftsman section. So it's assignment by. We usually say drafted by, either way. And then I'd like you to put your actual name in there instead of name McNamerson. Right? Over in this box here, you're going to go plate, small in one corner. Then we do a big number to say which number plate this is. And then in the corner you go of, and then the total number of plates for this project, which is 1. Now, if you went home and you didn't bring an 11 by 17 piece of paper with you, and you wanted to do this on 2 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, 2 regular sheets of paper, you absolutely could. You could fit this much on this side. So you could do this as one plate, and then you could do this side as another plate, but you would have to do 2 title blocks, and it would be plate 1 of 2 and plate 2 of 2. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out some guidelines for these guys up here. So, not quite arbitrary, but I'm choosing to lay out a guideline on the grid that's underneath here so that it's easier for me to do, because it's just easier that way. I'm going to put some space in between them, and once again, use the grid underneath to make sure I'm nice and straight, and I have guidelines for all of these pieces. Now I have guidelines for both rows with the Broadway Hollywood outswinging door and arch, this row here, and this row for this row here, and then I've got all this extra space for our other items. So I'm going to go ahead and do the chandelier. Now, I have a circle template, but I don't have a circle big enough for that chandelier. So I'm just going to use a circular object of any kind, and I'm going to trace that object. And I do want it to try and represent about how much physical space the actual chandelier will take up. And I'm going to make that a little bit thicker. And then I'm going to add some lines through that chandelier. And I also need to do a diagonal through that chandelier. Now, there are several different ways that I could do that, but I could use the triangle that I have in my hand to make that happen. That wouldn't be completely bisecting that circle in the way that I would like it to be. So I'm just going to freehand it and make it look correct, because ultimately it is a symbol rather than an exact piece. This chair, however, is an exact piece and needs to be measured and completed as such. But I am going to replace this with, or I'm going to label this over here first. Now I need a little 1'6" by 1'6" chair, and I need to round the corners. So it doesn't really matter where this is. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a little spot right here to make a guideline so that I can use the measure down here. So the measure down here, I can go 1'6" is going to be to this little spot right here. And that's 1'6" in scale. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here. But this time I'm going to have to measure because I just don't have anything that I can go off of. So I'm going to use the scale ruler, and I need to find 6 inches here and then mark 1 foot. Now that I've done that, I can go back to my triangles and do a nice straight line. If I didn't use my triangles, what I would do is I would measure on both sides. So I'd measure 1'6" over here as well. So now how do I get a curved corner? I could use my circle template again. So I could come in and just draw with the circle template to try and get those edges to be a nice curve, right? I could trace another curve that I have accessible, like the inside of this triangle edge. And I could, well, I keep running into this, so that's not going to work for that other corner. I could also, once again, trace a circular object. Now, this particular circular object is too big. So let's go with this. Yeah. There we go. So you don't have to erase all of your guidelines all the time, but if they are getting in the way, I like to erase them. I'm not going to erase the guidelines on any of the vertical things. And I'm also going to strengthen the lines of this box so that it has a better outcome. It has a better look to it. I also need to dimension this. So I'm going to go whoop, 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 and then use this right up against here and go whoop, whoop, whoop. Sound effects do assist in this process. And then I'm going to mark where it is. Now, since the dimension lines are so small, I am going to erase some of the overshoot of this dimension line. Mark it and label this a chair. All right, let's go to our tree, which is a little organic PC. Once again, I need some sort of circular object for the center of my tree. And I am going to use a compass this time, just because I have one sitting here. And when you use a compass, you want to set your compass to the right size. So if I want this to be a 1 foot diameter tree, I need to set this to 1/2 foot. And that way, when I draw this, it's going to be a perfect 1 foot diameter circle. And my pencil is meeting my pencil. There we go. I'm going to make this thicker by tracing this line because this part of the tree is cut through. So we talked about that in the drafting lecture. When you're cutting through something, that's the solid part, and it's very much kind of like cake. So we make it with this hatched line. So the easiest way to create that hatched line is by using a triangle of any shape up against another line, and I'm going to draw one piece of the hatch, move it over just a little bit, and I'm going to keep doing this nice consistent movement so that I get a nice even hatch on the inside of my piece. I'm going to make that measurement to dimension, and I'm going to bring it out, and I'm going to bring it over with a ruler to make it nice and straight. And then I'm going to make the mark that says diameter. That's a diameter symbol, 1 foot 0 inches, so that that's clear. And then I'm going to make the organic tree shape. And with the organic tree shape, it is exactly what you think it is. It's just an organic shape. I would recommend going ahead and doing whatever shape you want, but also like laying it in with a little bit of a super light line first, because it can be really hard to try and plan what you want that squiggle to look like while you're making these hatch marks. But then you're just going to come in and make your dashed line all the way around. We're doing pretty good here. We're about 48 minutes in, about 15 minutes into this project, and we're quite a ways through it. If this isn't relaxing for you, I understand, but also I find it very relaxing. I really love to draft, and I really love to figure these things out. And this is nice, like simple little sampler that can help you remember how it is you're supposed to draw natural objects every time that you're doing a show. Also, it can serve as a reminder of all of the sizes that things should be. Okay, so now we have this little block of extra information. And I'm going to go ahead and make a guideline right here because that is what fits. And you can see that it's dimensioned here that it's 6 feet tall, 1 inch, and 2 feet wide. So these boxes, instead of being 4 feet wide, are 2 feet wide. So here's a guideline for the other side of that. And then I'm going to do a box that is quote unquote 6 inches high. And that is it's a 1/4 of an inch in this scale. So it's gonna be that big. And then there's no remark about the space in between, so I'm gonna do that, which is just a little bit that I chose. I'm going to do another 6-inch mark. I'm going to do a significant amount of space because there is a significant amount of space there. And then a 1/2-inch mark to symbolize that 1 foot. So now I've got all of the boxes. They're a little bit lower, but that's fine. They're lower so that I have better access to them, to be honest. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to my other pencil because all of these are thick in the edge. The top one is thicker than the other ones, but I want to make sure that they're all nice and thick, nice and quick. Okay. So I'm going to shade this one so that it's a thicker color, which is much easier to do with the regular pencil than it is with the mechanical pencil. But it is possible with the mechanical pencil. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that hatch again. I'm going to do the hatch on this top one. The secret to doing this hatch is that you move it in a nice, even, consistent manner, meaning that the space in between each one is the same. You can use this bottom ruler for that. So every time you move a specific amount on that bottom ruler, and that makes everything nice and even and pretty. So we also have a dimension line here, a dimension line. All right, flip. A dimension line down here, and a dimension line up against this one and up against this one. So I'm going to repeat those dimensions: 6 inches, 1 foot 0 inches, and 2 feet 0 inches. Then I'm going to label it. This is a theater/section. So that means this is what we use for the theatrical building itself. So it's for the physical part of the building. And I should have used a guideline earlier. You can now see that it's kind of off, and that's fine. If you don't feel like drawing that guideline, you could also just use the triangle. So I can write outline 0.7 millimeters, and then hatch is 0.03 millimeters. This one over here is scenery. We'll often denote scenery either as an outline with 15 millimeter, that's the visible outline size, and it can occur with or without fill. All right, we're almost done. So that would be kind of 2 out of 3 sections done. I kind of consider this part in here the 3rd section. So now we have the 4th section here, which is some real stuff, some actual things that we would be drawing in a particular project. So kind of like before, I'm going to come up here and I am going to first go ahead and do my 4 foot dimension line, right? And then I'm going to draw my Broadway flat. And this is where I'm going to need to use a scale ruler to figure out how thick it is, because in this scale, your thickness of your flat should be 1 inch, which is pretty darn small. But we're going to go ahead and, whoops, I didn't have I don't know if you can see that line looks a little not level, and I didn't have my triangle all the way up against the ruler at the bottom. So that is where you can get into a little bit of trouble there. So I would go ahead and erase quite a bit of the thickness of that line to get it correct again. And yeah, so Broadway flat could be, there's 2 of them here. And the reason that there's 2 of them here is so that one of them can be filled and one of them can be open. So I don't know if you can see, but it's a lot harder for me to do this shading. Then I'm going to label it Broadway flat. But Jennifer, you didn't do that exactly the same. You're right, I didn't. And in fact, if you want to move these around because you're going to do it on another piece of paper, you absolutely can. The whole point of this project is that you are showing me that you can draft these objects. They don't have to be in exactly the same orientation. You just have to have all of the objects. So I went ahead and did measurements for both Hollywood flats so that I can go ahead and complete those. And I need to shade one of them. For the Hollywood and the Broadway flat, if you don't want to write it twice, I gotta switch pencils. It really is just harder to shade with a mechanical pencil. I love drawing and shading with a mechanical pencil. It's not that it's not easy to do, but it's going to take longer to be a soft shape. So keeping the regular pencil handy is a good idea. So let's label that Hollywood flat. Again, don't be afraid to use a guideline or a straight edge if you need to when making your objects. So now for my objects, I need to make an outswinging door. So this is one of the biggest things that we make essentially in like doorways, or just a big thing that we draft a lot. So we're going to go ahead and come down here and do kind of a guideline across the front. So this should be a Hollywood flat because it looks like one. So I'm going to come in and do my 3 inches. I'm also going to make a mark at 6 inches because that's the depth of the reveal here. And then I'm going to go across my piece and I'm going to make a mark, a very light mark in the center. And my door is going to be 2'6" wide. So on either side of this door, it's going to be 2'3". So I'm going to mark 2'3", or sorry, 1'3" on both sides of the door, so that I have a total of 1'6". So now I have a good foundation to be able to draw those additional pieces. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make that the reveal, the 1/4 inch piece right next to the door. I'm sorry, the 3/4 inch reveal. So it's the little piece right next to the door. And then I'm going to make the wall part the same on both sides. The front of the wall, thicken that up a little bit. And then there's a little piece down in front of the door too. And that is the door frame. So we see when we cut through, we're going to see all that door frame. So all of this would be gray because it's being cut through in this version of this set. And then the door is going to be in here. So in order to make that door open, I'm just going to give it, woohoo! I'm just going to give us a guideline kind of going out this way and make sure the second level of that guideline is the same line. And then I need to make sure that with a scale ruler, that door is 2'6", because it's 2'6" in order to open from that doorway. Okay. Now I could use a circle or anything like that to draw this arc, but since I have a compass here, I'm going to go ahead and make that compass twist, and then the arrow shows that it opens this way. The top of the wall is going to need some sort of header across the top of the door. So that's why there's a dashed line right here. And I'm going to do the skip 2, draw 2, skip 2, draw 2, all the way to the end of that. And there's also that same pattern is going to be on the front here, because skip 2, draw 2, skip 2, draw 2. It doesn't really matter. You can skip 1 if you want. I'm just skipping 2 because I feel like it, in order to draw my drafted line, and then label it outswinging door. but that allows you to see that the top of the molding is making the wall look a little thicker too. So that line, it wants to go to the bottom there. If you want, so in drawing all these other objects, you're just doing the same thing. So the next one is an arch. It's going to look exactly the same, except it's not going to have the door part. It's just an opening in the wall that does not have the door. So once again, I'm going to go with mark halfway. I'm going to do a mark at 1'3" on both sides of the guideline that we've got in the middle. I'm going to do a line at 6 inches for the depth of the reveal and 3 inches for the depth of the wall, and technically 1 inch for the depth of the framing that is on the front. Oh, this archway does not have framing, so I don't have to worry about that here. And then I'm going to make sure to have these pieces laid out. So when I'm doing this, it is very common to have to overshoot because you just don't know where exactly those measurements are going to intersect until you get to them. And that is one of the reasons why erasing is much more common when you're actually drafting objects and not just kind of drawing exactly what you see on a previously drafted piece of paper. But things like this will make you ask the questions, do I have a reveal in this wall? Is that reveal going to be 6 inches or 5 inches or 8 inches or 4 inches? When you get to the actual drafting part, you have to make all of these individual decisions to know exactly how big your item is going to be. So I don't know if you remember the labels we talked about, but we're going to draw a label down here. So you've got a circle that you'll put an archway flat on, and you have a circle that it'll come to, and you have a note. So here I'm going to go A, and then I'm going to take a little triangle and put that on the edge of that triangle and use that mark, and then fill that mark in with shading. Same letter. And archway flat label. And then notes. And you can make up your own notes if you like. Like that it has a painted frame rather than a dimensional one. And that'll tell my charge artist that they need to make that. So I'm going to go up from the bottom this time. We're going to do a traveling curtain first. And so that traveler starts with a dashed line. So I am doing this dashed line manually rather than using a ruler. But especially if you are unsure about where to put that draft line, you can do it you can do it with a ruler. Now these curved lines, you could use something for curved lines that is especially developed for curved lines. And that's something where you have a curve that'll help you make all those shapes. But none of these shapes are exactly, this is called a French curve. And it helps you to make a lot of these shapes. But none of this really gives me the exact shape that I'm looking for. So what I want to do is go ahead and just freehand these shapes. So I'm going to do 4 ups and 4 downs. So I'm going to go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And that is pretty close on this side. So on the other side, I'm just going to do a couple to show that this is a traveling curtain. On the next one, we're going to do a drapery without fullness. And so this means it is fabric, but it doesn't have a lot of fullness to it. This swishes that we did, that's fullness. So we're going to start and end in a very calculated place, but you're just going to do a slight swoosh. The next one is a drapery with fullness. And now generally you want to be a little bit more exact on this one. So I want to make sure that this takes up the appropriate amount of space that it's supposed to take up. And then I'll come in and do this drapery back and forth and make these curved lines. If you're having trouble with those curved lines, you can use a circle template for each one of those curves. Last but not least, we have 2 sets of windows. So once again, just like before, I'm going to do a guideline for these windows, and I'm going to lay out how big they are going to be. So I'm going to start with both the double hung window and the casement window, and I'm kind of going to draft these both at the same time because they're both windows. So for this, I once again am going to do the 6 inches for the reveal, the 3 inches for the flat, and the 1 inch in front for the window frame or the window sill, how it comes out. I'm also going to do a little 1 inch at the back for the thickness of the window in the double hung window. So I'm going to do that the same over here. A little bit in front, 3 behind, 6 behind, and a little. And I'm going to connect those. I'm also going to draw 2 and then 1 1/3, 1 3 inches, sorry, 1 3 inches, 1 3 inches. But this time I actually can do these both lined up together. That 1 3 inches I don't have to do on both of them. I can just transfer that line up, and that's perfectly fine. So now I know my wall is right here and right here. You know, the thickness of my reveal is here, here, and here. The height of my reveal is here and here, so I need to erase that down just a little bit. On my double hung window, I then have my thickness of my wall in the back. And in this window itself, I'm going to bring up the center line here. There is a little box for the center mullion, and there is a little box on the edge for each one of those mullions. So especially those get colored in, and these window panes do not get colored in. This side here gets colored in because it's solid. And that center part does not get colored in because it is a windowsill. So I'm also going to do these pieces here. And there you go. That is a double hung window. Casement window is going to need a little bit more space, but it is ultimately the same thing. We've got our piece here. We've got our front trim as well. Right? We have the back line of the window here, and I'll just shade these in. So these are shaded in because the wall has cut through. So that's the thickness of the lumber and the stuff that we're seeing. And then we can see the flat side of this because that's the windowsill, and that isn't exactly cut through. And now we are going to open these little casement windows. And so I am going to use the angle that's on this triangle. And the reason I'm going to do that is so that it is consistent on both sides. And then I'm going to use a scale ruler to figure out how long they're supposed to be. It's 2'6", so it's a 1'3" window. So that's how big it should be. And that's how big it should be over here. So we have plenty of room for this little window. And I'm just going to finish that off. And finish that off. And once again, on our drawing, there's little mullions in this. So the end has a mullion, the end has a mullion, and the center has a mullion. And everything in between is clear and visible. So this would be a casement window. All right. And that is your project. Completely complete from beginning to end. If you're doing any measurements on the inside, you do kind of what I did here, where you have measurements and then you connect to the other side. You do not have to erase any of these guidelines that are, 1 second, I forgot one thing. And that is, I didn't put a dimension on this window right here. Bloop, bloop, nope, bloop. Sound effects required. And bloop, doop, doop, 2'6". All right, now I'm done. I'm done. I'm really done. Really done. Really done. Really done that time. Promise. So I think I told you all that this took me a little over an hour, and it did. It took me an hour and 10-ish minutes. And I want to point out to you that that includes me telling you how to do all these things. Feel free to pause, fast forward, move around, but this is your project from beginning to end. When you're taking off your tape, be careful that you don't get this, rip this when you're taking it apart. And you can either bring it to me as a flat object, or you can roll it up to give it to me. I would like to see this project turned in physically, but you also need to take pictures of it and turn it in online just in case that this gets lost somewhere or moved around. So I want to make sure that you are all good with that project and that it looks good, and that you turn something in that is very exact, or as exact as you can possibly get it. And in particular, this drafting is the only time that I'm really holding you to a standard of making sure everything looks nice and neat and clean, and then you can hand it to me. This project is something you can pick up and put back down, especially if you've taped it to a grid and are using the grid to help you out. If not, that first border is something that you can use, or the paper's edge is something that you can use to make sure this is square. But that is your whole project. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.